Sparkly salutations! Ulta has made another Marvel collection, and I'm back again to talk about it because, just like the Black Widow collection, I have a lot of thoughts. Obviously, if you haven't seen WandaVision yet, this video might contain some spoilers, so you've been warned. Another disclaimer, I do not have any of the products that I'm going to be talking about here. They only went on Ulta's website on the 14th, and no one's sending PR to a channel with 49 subscribers, so I don't have the makeup here. If you're looking for reviews, you'll have to go somewhere else, but I hope that first you'll stick around and watch this instead, and please don't leave an angry comment for me. Okay, one more disclaimer before we start the actual content here. I was born in the 90s, so all of my knowledge of retro makeup trends comes from internet research and old TV and movies, but I've, tried to look into this a lot so I know what I'm talking about. I just don't have any first-hand experience because I was not there. So some of the products that Ulta made are interesting, but a lot of it falls flat in my opinion. I do appreciate that they tried to have the products fit the different decades that the show covered, but I think with a little bit more thought put into what they were doing, it could have been more connected to the show and not just the decades. Let's start with the eyeshadow palette vault. So they made 3 palettes, and in true Ulta style, the pictures available on the website are not great. For $20, you get 18 eyeshadows divided into a 50s and 60s palette, a 70s palette, and an 80s and 90s palette. It's interesting to me that they chose to sell them as a bundle because I feel like if the 80s palette appeals to you, then there's a good chance that the 50s and 60s one doesn't. I know I personally have no interest in the first palette, I only really like the purple in the second one, and I would genuinely have fun using the third one. Eyeshadow was pretty minimalistic in the 50s, and the 60s had some seriously dramatic eye looks. It's hard to see the colors in the top row of that palette, but they seem like they'd be pretty good for 50s inspired looks. The blue and the green on the bottom row also make sense for the 60s, so this palette, while a bit dusty looking, seems like it fits that time period. I'm really bummed that they decided to make the 70s palette a bunch of neutrals with one purple. I know the natural beachy bronzy look was very popular, but those colors are boring. They could have had shimmery pastels or embraced the disco looks that happened in the 70s. I loved that blue eyeshadow they put on Geraldine during that episode. It was so great. The palette that's supposedly 80s and 90s seems more like an 80s palette with a single black for doing grungy 90s looks. Honestly, 80s makeup and 90s makeup contrast a lot more than they overlap, so putting those 2 decades together into one palette seems like kind of a weird move. The shade names used in these palettes are the same kind of thing we saw with the Black Widow palette. It seems like they had an assortment of vaguely witchy words and paired them randomly with the colors they'd chosen. Something that I'm sure was just a coincidence is that the purple shimmer is named Enchanted, and I'm pretty sure there's an ABH single shadow that's also a purple shimmer named Enchanted, so I thought that was interesting. Anyway, the names are a little bit hard to read, and with that one picture being all we get, I did my best to figure out what they were. So as far as I can tell, they're Charmed, Flourish, Familiar, Tonic, Jinxed, Magnetic, Illusion, Hexed, Sparkle, Baddie, Rune, Enchanted, Elixir, Wicked, Chaos, Allure, Hypnotic, and Supernatural. None of them make me think of WandaVision specifically, aside from maybe Hexed, but even then, just Hex would have made more sense. Agatha does say that Wanda uses chaos magic, so I guess there's that. Runes get used twice, so Rune is relevant, I guess, and there are illusions and enchantments happening. For Magnetic, you could argue that Magneto is sometimes Wanda's father, but that didn't come up in the show because her dad was a Sokovian guy who was presumably not a mutant villain, so Magnetic as a name is kind of irrelevant here. The only reason I can really tell that these are WandaVision palettes is because of the little Wanda icon on them, and that's not a sign of a good collaboration. If you covered up the outer labels, those could have just been Ulta's version of the Urban Decay Mini Decades palettes, but with weird shade names. If I were put in charge of a WandaVision eyeshadow palette, I think the obvious way to go would be to name colors after important characters. So in my version, Vision would be a maroon, and Wanda would obviously be a scarlet red shade. Monica would get a light blue to represent how her eyes glowed. Jimmy gets a dark blue like his uniform, and my husband suggested calling that shade Jimmy Blue, but while I do love the pun, I don't have puns for the other ones, so I'm just gonna call it Jimmy. Darcy would have a deep brown because of her gorgeous hair. Billy and Tommy would be a true red and a green because of the colors they wore in the show, which were a nod to their comic uniforms as Wicked and Speed. Agatha is a purple, Uncle P is a silver, and Sparky is a caramel color like the fur on his little head. I'd probably call the palette Views of Westview or something, and have the design on the front be a picture of the deed with Vision's sweet little note on it. although maybe that wouldn't be a good idea because then I'd be sad every time I looked at it. A less depressing palette cover would be either just black or a deep maroony red with the red Scarlet Witch headpiece on it, and then I could call the palette Scarlet Witch or something. Fun fact, I was just figuring out the eyeshadows I wanted for that palette earlier, and I haven't washed them off my arm yet, so my shirt is in danger. There's one bag in this collection, and it costs $16. We only have the one picture of it, they didn't list the dimensions, and we don't know if there are any pockets or dividers inside. Great job, Ulta. Not like those are helpful to know or anything. I'm amused by the description they have on the website, so I'm going to read that to you real quick. The Ulta Beauty Collection and Marvel Studios' WandaVision cosmetic bag will carry all your makeup to help you create mystifying looks wherever you go. This classy cosmetic bag features a top handle with zipper closure, so your items will always be safely stored away. Drawing attention to a zipper and acting like it's this really neat feature reminds me of when hotel websites don't have very many things to brag about in the amenities section, so they say, each room has a private bathroom and toilet paper. It's like, oh, cool. It looks like the bag might be kind of sparkly, but since we only have one picture, I can't tell. The most expensive part of this collection, and one of the only things I have any interest in actually buying, is the $28 brush set. There are powder, stippling, concealer, shadow blending, and small shadow brushes, and a small bag comes with the set. The brush handles are kind of... they remind me of Sean Yu's sword in Mulan. Like, they're cool, but they're also weird, you know? There are tiny Scarlet Witch headpieces on the smoother parts of the handles, and the bag also has a pattern that's kind of like the one on the bigger bag, but also not. After looking at these products for so long, all of the packaging kind of blends together for me. It's all red or pink with some kind of pattern and gold accents. My husband said it kind of looks like a tweaked Lunar New Year collection, and he's not wrong. When I was first brainstorming what I would do if I were making a WandaVision collection, I thought it would be fun to have brushes with hexagonal handles. Yes, hexagonal. The brushes would have hexagon handles. There we go. That would fit the theme because, you know, the hex, and they also wouldn't roll off of things as easily as regular brushes. I would have chosen a shimmery red material for the handle so that it kind of looked like the glowy dome around Westview. These nail decals confuse me. Isn't the main draw of nail decals that they can have cool patterns like flowers and stuff that are hard to do if you're just painting your own nails? Because I thought that was the entire point of them, but anyway. Aside from that, the 80s and 90s nail set is clearly just 80s nails with that neon color. By far the most popular nail polish colors in the 90s were Sky from Hard Candy and Vamp from Chanel. So that neon pink is... there's no 90s inspo there, it's just 80s. The 70s design is black with silver glitter, which is probably the kind of thing the disco fans would wear, so yeah, okay. For the 50s and 60s, the decals are apparently in a French manicure design. The thing about that is that the iconic French manicure wasn't really a thing until the 70s. In the 50s, red nail polish was really big, and nudie shades became a lot more popular in the 60s. White nail polish wasn't all that common until Jeff Pink of Orly created the Your Nail But Better French manicure look. White polish got a lot easier to find after that because the French manicure became a really popular trend. But they weren't invented yet in the 50s and 60s, and the decals also don't really look like French manicures anyway, so I have several questions. You would think that a collection based on WandaVision would contain a fair amount of red to use, but the lip kit is the only red makeup. There's plenty of red all over the packaging, yet this is the only thing that puts red onto your face. No red eyeshadow, no red blush, no red eyeliner, not even red nail decals or body glitter. Very weird. A classic red lip is a no-brainer to have in this collection, although I think that a bullet lipstick would have been more appealing for the average consumer and also more in line with the theme. I think liquid lipstick wasn't really a thing until the 90s, at least not like this one. It would have been extra work and thus cost more to do, but I really wish they could have done a lipstick for each of the decades with unique designs on each tube. The 50s lipstick could have grayscale packaging and be that true red we tend to associate with 50s makeup. For the 60s, maybe a peach or a light pink with a groovy tube. Plum was a popular color for the disco fans in the 70s, so I think a plum shade in a tube that looks like Geraldine's Excellent Fish Pants would have been very fun. The 80s had a lot of bold colors going on, and I think a fuchsia would be a good fit. Metallic light pink might be a bit more accurate, but a non-frosty fuchsia would probably sell better. Dark lipstick was popular in the 90s, so I picture that one to be kind of a wine or a brownish red, sort of like what I'm currently wearing, in a tube that has a flannel pattern on it. I've mentioned before, but I think it's strange to have staple products like primers and brow pencils in limited edition collections, and oh look, a WandaVision brow kit for some reason. This has a clear brow gel, a double-ended brush and spoolie, a brow highlighting pencil, and a double-ended brow pencil with taupe on one side and dark brown on the other. Brow pencils are something that a lot of people tend to go through relatively quickly, and if you find one you like, it would be frustrating to not be able to repurchase it when you run out. Another issue I have with that pencil is that I'm not sure how many people would be able to actually use both ends. The colors don't look all that different in the one picture that we have on the website, and we don't have any swatches of it, so it's hard to tell what those will actually look like in your eyebrows. If they are similar colors, then sure, I guess that works for people whose eyebrows are certain depths of brown. I think it would have made more sense to have the pencil just contain one shade and sell multiple variations of the brow kit so that people could choose whichever one would most likely suit their brows. Alternatively, you could not make a limited edition brow kit. False lashes were super popular in the 60s, so while I don't personally wear them, I acknowledge that it does make a lot of sense to have them in this collection. This lash set even has a WandaVision specific name! The packaging says Westview Wink on it, and that is adorable. So it turns out Ulta is capable of giving their Marvel products names that make sense, they just choose to mostly not. I would speculate that Marvel is so paranoid about spoilers getting out that they don't allow the people designing the makeup to know very much about the show, except I'm pretty sure that I saw a Funko Pop of pregnant Wanda before the show had even started airing, so I don't get it. Another 60s inspired product is the eyeliner duo. For $12 you get a felt tip liner and a double-ended stamper for making cat eye wings. I don't have a whole lot to say about this because I think that stamps are a great idea because a lot of people, like me, struggle with eyeliner. So hey, if this gets good reviews and goes on sale someday, then maybe I'll get it. There are two liquid eyeshadows named Silver and Gold, which honestly looks more like a rose gold to me, but whatever. I can understand them not giving names to the red lip products because those are the only things that they have in that format, but with these, since there's two different shades, I guess they just ran out of vaguely witch-related names and gave up. Generic names aren't great, but at least they're something. Lack of creativity aside, these look like they'd be fun for adding some disco sparkle to your eyes. I'm not sure they're worth $10 though. This next product is my least favorite part of the entire collection, the bronzer and highlighter palette. This is supposed to help you mimic that 70s glowy tan look that Farrah Fawcett rocked so well. The shades here are Nostalgia, Timeless, Stellar, and Everlasting. Boring names again, but we've come to expect that by now. The main problem is that these bronzers both seem very light to me. The one on the bottom left is described as medium bronze, and Ulta called the one on the right deep bronze. Deep bronze. At least with the Black Widow face palettes, there were two different options. There was, light and slightly less light. But with this collection, they apparently decided to make one face palette that wouldn't be very useful to anyone darker than, like, tan Emma Watson, and called it good. Honestly, Ulta, you should be very embarrassed by this. Speaking of not so great choices, let's look at those $12 plumping lip glosses. The two shades are named Mauve and Nude. Once again, they're not even trying to come up with interesting names. The thing about nude is that it's a concept that depends on your skin tone. It isn't just a specific color. So to someone like Viola Davis, that peachy color they decided to name nude is not in fact a nude, and that tells me that Ulta made this gloss with white people in mind and didn't stop to consider that naming it peach would be both more descriptive and less exclusionary. So please do better, Ulta. Moving on to the 80s, the blush palette they made seems like overkill to me and also doesn't do a great job of catering to a diverse range of people. It seems like makeup consumers in general are using fewer blush palettes and more singles or duos these days because the general trend is smaller products, so a palette of 4 blushes is an odd choice to me. Once again, the names they chose are super disappointing. Spell, Hexed, Magic, and Warped. They already used Hexed as an eyeshadow name, so I guess they only had 29 generic magic names to choose from and had to double up on one. My version of a WandaVision blush product would be a duo called An Unusual Couple, with a cute 80s style cartoon of Wanda and Vision on the front. The blush shades would be a slightly shimmery scarlet and a satin maroon. The cool thing about blush is that a really dark blush can still work on a light skin tone as long as you're careful about how much you're using. So these blush colors both fit the theme of the show and would be more easily used by a wider variety of skin tones. The colorful eyeliners are another representation of the 80s, and I think they're a very fun thing to include in this collection. The names of these are Frequency, Static, Haywire, and Distortion. Static is the pink one for some reason, but I think the name fits the black one better because TV static is, black, white, grayish stuff. They're relevant to what was going on in the show without actually being connected to the show in any specific ways. We've now come to the only products besides the lashes that got genuinely good names. the two roll-on body glitters. This duo is $14, and there's a pink glitter named Please Stand By and a blue one named Technical Difficulties. I wish I had some reason to wear body glitter because these are beautiful. This is petty, but I'm bothered that the mauve and clear lip balm and gloss duos are listed as separate product pages when they could have been merged together like the plumping glosses and liquid eyeshadows. Each duo is $16, which seems like a lot, and we have no idea how pigmented the mauve balm and gloss are because there are no swatches or smear pictures or anything. The mauve gloss is called Mauve Pink, and the clear one is, you guessed it, clear. The mauve balm is cherry scented, and the clear balm smells like watermelon for some reason. Was watermelon an especially popular scent for lip products in the 90s? Because I don't remember that being a thing, but maybe it was. The packaging for these is depressingly plain. It reminds me of Old Avon or those brands you've never heard of that you find in Big Lots. That's the end of the real products that Ulta and Marvel made, but I still have some bonus ideas to share. Something they could have done to play with the decades aspect of the show is to have compacts of setting powder or even just compact mirrors that have vintage style packaging. To make a collection based on a show that covered the 50s through modern times and not have at least one nod to how elegant and beautiful vintage makeup packaging was is a huge shame. Think of the beautiful things that Besame has made. I'm just really sad we didn't get to see something like that. This idea isn't very likely to have gotten approval, but I think a glowy iridescent red highlighter named the Hex would have been pretty cool. The trouble is that red highlighter isn't something that a lot of people would want to wear, so Ulta probably wouldn't have wanted to make it. But oh well, I can dream. Overall, this collection is pretty meh. I like the idea of having products themed around the different time periods of a show covered, but I feel like they did too much with the decades and not enough with the WandaVision. There's an almost overwhelming amount of red going on packaging-wise, yet the only red to be found in the makeup itself is a lip liner and liquid lipstick. I truly hope that this is the last of the Ulta and Marvel collaborations. I would love to have good, thoughtfully made Marvel makeup, and I think there are so many brands that could actually do that. Urban Decay, ColourPop, Wet n Wild. I mean, I would trust e.l.f. with Marvel at this point, because did you see their Chipotle collaboration? That palette has the eyeshadows laid out as if you're actually looking at the place where burritos get made. That's the kind of attention to detail that I would love to see in a Marvel collection, not this. Thanks for sticking around while I complained about another disappointing collision of two of my favorite things. I hope this was interesting and that I don't get too many comments yelling at me for not reviewing the makeup when I tried to be as clear as I could that that's not what this video was going to be. If anyone from Ulta is watching this and you don't hate me somehow, please hire people who genuinely love whatever franchise you collaborate with next. That's all for now. Stay safe and have a magical day. Okay, it is so windy that my fence is wobbling like a loose tooth right now.